This game had it all. A time-traveling Native American warrior called Turok? Check. Based on a hit comic book series? Check. An evil mastermind trying to destroy the universe with a powerful weapon? Check. Is there anything that could make this game better? Yes, dinosaurs. First off, I'd like to say a big thank you to Polkin, who recommended I make this video that takes me on a journey back and reminisces about one of the finest consoles I've ever played on, the Nintendo 64. Yes, I love Turok, Dinosaur Hunter. Hello everybody, I'm Roy McCoy and welcome to my latest episode of my series, What Happened To, where we take a game and or series from history and ask those all-important questions. What was it? What happened to it? And could we ever see it again? And this time the subject focus is the amazing Turok. Please remember to hit that like button on this video because it really helps the video to do well. And also, if you are into these kind of videos, make sure to subscribe. But after that, let's crack on with today's video. So, let me take you on a journey through time and space, much like Turok did, back to the year 1997, when I, as a very young teenager, had saved all my pocket money to buy this game. And as I put the cartridge into the machine, into my Nintendo 64, my life was about to change forever. This game blew my mind, and if you look at the original trailer, it's not much to look at now. In fact, most of the footage of the original Turok I'll use is from the remastered version. It combined the fun and frantic elements of Doom with exploration, looking around. It wasn't just a simple shooter, it involved more than that. But the thing I enjoyed the most about this game was the plot. Undoubtedly, you took control, as I said, of a time-traveling Native American warrior who wanted to save the universe. The big bad in this game was called the Campaigner, who was looking for an ancient artifact known as the Chronoceptor, a weapon that was so powerful it had been split into pieces. It was a classic story, and basically a race against time where you had to reassemble the Chronoceptor before the Campaigner got his hands on it and destroyed the universe. And the basic premise of the game was this. You started off in a kind of hub area and you went to 7 different levels. In each level, you looked for keys. When you had enough keys, you could open up another portal. There were lots of different weapons to play with, including knives, shotguns, and of course, the aforementioned Chronoceptor. The game was developed by Iguana Entertainment, who were actually purchased by Acclaim Entertainment. That old classic Acclaim. That's a name I haven't heard for a very long time. Sound like Obi-Wan Kenobi now. But after they bought the rights to the comic books, they decided to make a game of it. They combined 2 of their assets to make something that stands out in my mind. And sadly, when I looked at the graphics, first of all on the remastered, I thought, oh, they're not too bad, they hold up. But then when looking at the original graphics from the N64, I have to say, that game has not aged well. It's sad, and it's one of those things that I often say should be left to history now. I am going to be starting a new series very soon called Remake Wishlist, and Turok Dinosaur Hunter, the original game, is on my wishlist at some point. I want that remake, but for now I won't be putting Turok back into my N64 because I think a little bit of my childhood will die when I see that. One thing that still stands with me about the brilliance of this game was the lore. Yes, the plot was interesting enough, save the world from an evil overlord, but the lore. Turok was a title passed from generation to generation, and each one of the Turoks had to protect the barrier between the Earth and the Lost Land, and the Lost Land was a dangerous place filled with a variety of creatures like dinosaurs and aliens, and time had no meaning. So, as I said, this game was released in 1997 on the Nintendo 64, published by Acclaim Entertainment, a company which chose its name so that it would be alphabetically superior to the company where their founders had previously worked, that being Activision. Something really interesting to say at this point, this was the first third-party game ever to be made on the N64. The controls, the looks, the gameplay, everything about this game was phenomenal, and it was a commercial success. It still holds a decent ranking on Metacritic with 85, but more importantly, it has a huge fan base who remembers this classic. So, when games are a success, as Turok was, we get a sequel. And once more, Iguana Entertainment gave us a brilliant game, coming in the year 1998. Just 1 year later, we had Turok Seeds of Evil, this time with multiplayer. It was once again a first-person shooter, and you could do all the wonderful things like running, jumping, crawling, climbing ladders, and going underwater. The game felt so freeing. Just using that bow and arrow to take down dinosaurs was a fantastic experience. The plot this time saw you taking control of a new Turok named Joshua Fireseed. Where did they get these names from? They're brilliant. This time, the big bad was an alien creature known as the Primogen, who had been imprisoned inside the wreckage of his ship, and it was your job to take him down before he escaped. This game was also a huge commercial success, and once again was credit to the ability of Iguana Entertainment. And it still holds a pretty high score on Metacritic, standing at 86. Now, I have to say at this point, Turok, when I was younger, I loved first-person shooters. I absolutely loved them, especially on the Nintendo 64. I found the controls and the controller just really, really easy to function back in the day. Games like GoldenEye, Perfect Dark, and Turok stand in my memory as some of the greatest first-person shooters, up there with things like Time Splitters, Doom, and Quake. In fact, the list of first-person shooters, I could make a video just talking about first-person shooters that I liked. But Turok is up there, and it did its own thing. Much like Time Splitters, the incorporation of the lore and the story set this game apart in some way. Time-traveling Native American warriors is just it for me, fighting dinosaurs. It was also the first in the series to incorporate a multiplayer mode, which on the N64 was up to 4 players via split screen. I'm pretty sure in my mind that the N64 was the first console to use 4 controllers, and having 3 other friends round at the same time, battling it out on Turok 2 Seeds of Evil was epic, and then immediately changing it up for GoldenEye. So at the moment, the series was going pretty darn strong. And in 1999, we got our third Turok game, Turok Rage Wars, and this was developed this time by Acclaim Studios Austin, but don't let that fool you, that was just the rebranding of Iguana Entertainment. It came out in 1999, and for me, this was a low point of the series. It was released once more for the N64, and this first-person shooter had a heavy emphasis on multiplayer. It was also the first game not seen as canon, so the story itself was inconsequential. And basically, if I had to summarize it, there was multiplayer, 2-player trial mode, and single-player trial mode. And even the single-player trials mode was effectively a series of death matches. For me, they tried to change too much, but what I understand from Acclaim's thinking at the time, they felt that Turok 2 Seeds of Evil couldn't explore its multiplayer aspects enough. And therefore, they decided to make a separate game that really built on the multiplayer aspects. However, for me, Turok was already a standout single-player experience. So the fact they decided to make a game solely for the multiplayer aspect, especially on a console like the N64, is why this game doesn't hold up very well in my memory. Turok prided itself on decent lore, exciting plots, interesting stories, and suddenly you've got a game dedicated to multiplayer and single-player deathmatch experiences. But while the game did get some decent reviews, I still felt that it wasn't the great experience that it should have been. However, the Turok train did not end there. And in the year 2000, we got Turok 3 Shadow of Oblivion. And it was the sequel to Turok 2 Seeds of Evil. This time you had 2 playable characters, and the brilliant thing about this is that the 2 characters had different abilities. So for example, Joseph could crawl and use a sniper rifle, while Danielle could jump higher and have some high-powered weapons. And the thing I loved about this game so much is that it followed on the story from Turok 2. After the Primogen's lightship was destroyed, it basically created a huge reaction that decimated the universe. And this time, you take on the big bad of Oblivion. The game starts off with the current Turok from the previous game, Joshua. Joshua Fireseed, what a name! Oblivion tries to kill Joshua in his sleep, and he tells his sister, Danielle, and brother, Joseph, to escape. And it's for this reason that you must decide who is the new Turok, Danielle or Joseph. The game once more was really well received, however, not as well as the previous 2 single-player games, this time getting a score of 77 on Metacritic. Still a respectable score, but we're starting to go down. So up until now, the 4 Turok games, Dinosaur Hunter, Turok 2 Seeds of Evil, Rage Wars, and Turok 3 Shadow of Oblivion. Let's not talk about Rage Wars, that doesn't really count, it's not canon, it's not there, had all been on the N64. And in 2002, we got our first game not on the N64. Turok Evolution was a prequel to Turok Dinosaur Hunter for the PlayStation 2, Xbox, and GameCube. And to be honest, this is the point where I think that the series really started to go wrong. It felt very rushed and it didn't capture the magic. That combined with the fact they didn't release it on the N64, probably because the console was at the end of its life cycle, but it just felt a bit detached. This time, the bad guy was a guy called Tobias Bruckner, who has the wonderful joy of being eaten by Compsognathus, those tiny little creatures that we saw in Jurassic Park: The Lost World. And it's basically an origin story of how the first Turok seen in Turok Dinosaur Hunter became Turok. But this is not a fond memory for me. I didn't enjoy this game as much as I was hoping. The Metacritic score at the moment on PS2 stands at 61. And that signalled the end of Acclaim's input on the Turok series, with Acclaim soon after being declared bankrupt. Which brings us on to the last game so far in the Turok series, kind of. And that is a reboot in 2008 that hit the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3, and it was simply titled Turok. It was developed by Propaganda Games and published by Touchstone Games, which is part of Disney Interactive Studios. And while it had a similar format of single-player and multiplayer aspects, for me this game just didn't hit the mark. And to be honest, the reviews tell the same story. At the moment, the PS3 version has a Metacritic score, a whopping 67. For me, the problem with this game, it looked okay, it felt okay, but it just didn't capture the magic of the original games. Sure, the story was very similar, and this time the big bad was a guy called Kane, who was your Turok, Joseph Turok's former commander. But I think the problem for me with this game, I understand that it was a reboot, but it detached itself completely from the story of the originals. And yes, that's what reboots do. But for me, it lost a little bit of the magic along the way. Even the fact that the Turok was now just his name, and it wasn't a mantle passed on. However, the game did well enough to garner a sequel. Turok 6 in terms of chronology, and Turok 2 in terms of the reboot. But it wasn't meant to be. The game was cancelled halfway through after Propaganda Games suffered some layoffs and their eventual closure in 2011. And that should pretty much be the end of the story for this game. However, there were 2 more additions. And thanks to Night Drive Studios, in the year 2017 we saw a remastered version hitting Windows and 2018 on the Xbox One of Turok Dinosaur Hunter. A remaster was here, and while it doesn't look amazingly perfect, it does capture the magic of that brilliant game and is worth a play. In the same years, we also got a remastered version of Turok 2, which means that Turok and Turok 2 are alive and well on Xbox One and the PC. They are gone, but not forgotten, and they're still kind of here if you want to play them. So, now we get to that all-important question. Could we see a new Turok? And I'm going to say definitely yes. Judging by the success of the remastered or remade versions of Turok and Turok 2, I wouldn't be surprised if in the near future we had the announcement of a complete reboot which drew its inspiration on the original games heavily. This is something I strongly believe will happen, and I wouldn't be surprised if someone like Night Dive Studios, who have bought the rights for System Shock, would also buy the full rights for Turok if they don't own them already, and make a new game. And that is something I would love to see. Let me know in the comments below if you think this is going to happen, and any other games that you would like to see included in my series, What Happened To. But for today, this is Roy McCoy, out.